6-7, what does it mean? Well, to the kids, it means pretty much nothing, right? Of course, it came from a pop star who seemed to admit in a number of interviews that he worships Satan, follows certain ancient gods. I mean, he says it himself. But I think with the kids, even though it has maybe an inspiration through another inspiration connection with that guy, I don't think it has any kind of negative spiritual connotations as far as I can tell. My wife's a teacher. She hears 6-7 all the time. In fact, she likes to do it too, and it makes it a little less cool. So that's one way to stem the flow of 6-7s in your life, if you're wondering. But really, I think for kids, it's a way that they can connect with each other. I mean, how often in your memory has something been done by all the kids in a class and in your own classrooms over the years that you can remember that just kind of brought everyone into camaraderie? There's a few things, but often it took some level of finesse to pull it off. 6-7, that's something everyone does, everyone can do. They all get a kick out of it. It annoys the adults. It's something cool just because it is. But further, there is a deeper meaning that I think kids are connecting with 6-7. And it's not that negative one that you might have heard from certain ministers or TikTokers or what have you. I don't think something that's created by someone who might have certain dispositions and is taken up by others and used for all these things, for connection, for life, has to have some kind of evil meaning even in those new uses. I mean, we don't look at every tool that we have and say, well, you know who created this? Yeah, so this is demonic, can't use a hammer anymore, right? No, that's not how tools work. That's not how life works. People use things, whether they're good or bad, and sometimes it popularizes it with a good crowd. Doesn't mean that they're connecting with demonic forces all of a sudden. And 6-7 in particular, as you can see if you review some of the deeper esoteric meanings of numbers in whatever tradition, tends to have a really profound meaning. When we look at the Bible, for example, it's one of the clearest where we can see this profundity, where 6 represents what? What does 6 tend to represent in the Bible? The one that comes to mind for most of us is 666, right? I do not agree with embodying 666, whatever it is. Don't let me offend you by saying that out loud, but sometimes we have to say the name Satan. We have to call evil out when we hear it, right? And 666 is something that shows up in the Bible representing perhaps the devil, representing perhaps the Antichrist. If that's the devil, then I guess both. But very clearly it represents a state of struggle, of evil, of pain and revelation. Now in other places though, 6 and the meaning of 6 become a little clearer because some of those points about that 3 numbered number are debatable, right? So in Genesis, for example, we have 6 days before the Sabbath, and that helps to clarify it for me anyway, where we see God working, struggling, maybe symbolically, maybe it's a symbolic story, for 6 days before we find peace. And indeed, I think most of the Bible is actually talking about this process of going from 6 to 7, from 6 days of struggle to a 7th day of peace. And it doesn't say that God started working again at a new 6 or a new 6 days, right? It's actually representative of us going from a state of being set upon, being oppressed, being an oppressor, and letting those things go to peace, to wholeness, to holiness. Yes, 6-7, I believe, represents a deep spiritual promise and hope for all of us that we can go from a place of struggling with our minds, with our ideas, with our perspectives, with work, with family, with whatever, into a flow state. We give that up and find peace and find Sabbath. That's what most of us want, whether we're working for it through meditating or learning about religion or just taking some time out of our day to escape all the busyness, putting our headphones in, ignoring that phone call, that talkative person, that whatever it is, right? We all seek this transition from, yes, 6 to 7. And in fact, according to a lot of the world's gurus today, and if you look at prophecies, I feel like these things coincide. We're in a state as a whole civilization from going from 6, struggle, pain, all these things, negative things, it seems anyway negative, right? To 7, to overcoming them, to finding wholeness, to finding economic clarity and freedom and peace and generosity. Because really, if you think about the history of humankind, it's now that we're actually struggling the most as a species on average. Yes, we all have cars, we all have this and that, but there was no time in history where a village had most of its inhabitants working, slaving away 2 shifts a day just for that village to get by, right? It wasn't like that. If you imagine it, if we were to take 2025, 2026 and go back to, the times before when we were still living kind of a more, feet to the earth, indigenous way, we would see something horrendous, right? Where all these villagers, although they live as a family, having to slave away, and 1 or 2 saying, "Well, I own this because I came up with this thing in general. I said we should crop one day, and now I own all the profit from this crop, and you get this much from this crop, you get this much from this crop, and all this rest is mine. And in fact, because I own that, I bought up all our huts, and you rent this hut, so you got to work a little more. Maybe at night you can come massage my feet, you know, you can come, I don't know, comb my hair. You can do this and that for me because I'm the chief or I'm the whatever, and I own everything here." No, that's not how it was. We had a propensity to share. Those of us who wanted to dominate others still tended to feed the village, right? We fed each other because we're all doing it together. We might go conquer other areas, but we are in this together. And in fact, of course, the greatest leaders, the greatest times of prosperity came from those leaders who led from peace, from 7. And so I hope that today, when we look around us and see so much struggle, so much horror, and it seems like more than usual because we can finally see it. I mean, it was going on before all this stuff in, Hollywood and wherever, all this stuff with politicians, all this stuff with people with power. It's going on for maybe millennia, perhaps. But we, at least in the last couple centuries, haven't heard much about it. And yet we're so oppressed by it until now. Now we see it, and we can see the 6, and we're hoping for the 7, right? And that is the promise of 6-7. I feel like this thing that's bringing our kids together is actually symbolic of moving from a state of 666 to 7, to peace, to Sabbath. In fact, if we look throughout the scriptures, we see these numbers used the same way again and again. It's like the number 40 in scripture, always used to represent temptation. 40, days of flooding, 400 years of slavery. We even see that with slavery in the US, right? 400 years. Why do these numbers repeat the same way again and again? Perhaps it's because humanity thinks in symbols, but I'm getting off topic a little bit. 6 shows up and we see struggle, we see working, we see striving. For example, with Goliath, he was 6 cubits tall and his sword was 600 shekels long, right? Interesting, right? Goliath, David must represent 7, probably, right? And of course, 7 shows up throughout David's culture as a sign of holiness and peace. We have the 7 days of the week, with the seventh being the peace day, the Sabbath day. We have 7 days for priestly consecration. We have 7 times around Jericho before it comes down on that last day, which was the 7th day. These things go on and on. We see 7 used this way, where the thing representing uh, non-alignment with a God of peace, the 6, right, falls to 7. And so that's why it's so cool that it happens to be this one thing that's bringing all these kids together. You don't need excellent timing to get 6, 7 right. You just have to respond when someone says it. You know, in my day, it was another number that would get the laughs in class, right? It may still get laughs in class, but 6, 7 takes the cake. It brings all these kids together. And I think it's representative itself of this 7th state of union, of unity in the Spirit of God. You know, I'm Christian. I like to think of myself as kind of a mystical thinker. I like mystics like Emanuel Swedenborg, who's a Christian mystic, inspired Helen Keller, Jung, Emerson, so many others. And I find it fascinating that something so blatantly random just happens to fall in line with this Christian mysticism, this symbolism. But more so, I think, in mysticism, it's not that you have to be Christian to get into heaven. That's not what it means, according to most Christian mystics, when Jesus says, I am the way, the truth, the life. Only through me can you find the Father. No, Jesus was speaking from this state of being the peace, being the way. He said it himself, the way, capital W, right? The truth, capital T, the life. And he wasn't saying, get my name right, which was probably pronounced Yeshua or something similar, right? He was saying, no, it's through love, it's through peace, it's through what I embody that you have to go through. You have to take upon yourself to find your inner spiritual sun. That source of your inner spiritual sunshine is God himself, herself, their self, right? God is beyond gender because God is the source of all goodness. Some people like to say God's only a he. Well, it's like, well, where's the goodness of women coming from, right? And so, no, God is beyond boundaries. And this 7, I think, represents a hope that we come into a place of letting go of boundaries, the boundaries of economic servitude, slavery. You know, we used to laugh when I was growing up about the caste system in India. How crazy is it that they have that, right? And yet, our whole structure is a gradated caste system. It's just more expert in how it's laid out. How much money do you have? Were you able to get that copyright through? Oh, it was confiscated by the government. I'm sorry. You worked how many years on that? Well, the government says you can't use it because it's a little too good. Do me a favor and look up the kinds of things that the government confiscates from the Copyright Office. Yeah, if you came up with things that were too great the last more than 50 years, the government took it and said, never talk about this again. And we hear examples of them doing worse things, right? When you come up with all kinds of amazing things. And so, yes, we live in a regimented, false, free capital system because it's not free capital. We only tend to value moneyed capital because that can be leveraged with people who hoard it like dragons. Human capital, no, it gets as little return as possible. That's not how economics says it should go. Union busting, all these kinds of things that build up, all these regulations coming through thanks to uh, billionaire influence, countryed influence, all these hidden forces manipulating politicians and our government and the administration of that government, and on and on and on, right? It's not a free system. In theory, it would work, perhaps. And yet, even at the best of times, our capitalistic system in the West has used the excess funds that people accumulate to come back to the people, not leaving it in the hands of those who've hoarded it like whatever, right? But using it, using it. There used to be a thing, I think, uh, with the Romans, and I'm not big on Rome. Come on, there are greater civilizations. We just are a little too, dare I say it, racist to talk about them very much. But I have picked up a few things about Rome that seem pretty interesting, such as how Rome used to employ its most successful individuals a year at a time for some kind of public works project. That person used their own funds, hired their own people, and there used to be a competition as to who had the greater one, right? In recent years, how much could be done, how much improvement to the people there could be. And so perhaps we don't have to go back to a purely kind of village mindset, although I think the mindset would be the best, but maybe not a village structure exactly. But there are ways that we can structure our system to say, no, you didn't do it on your own. If you're this or that, if you're in a position of power, that's because people helped you up. Roads literally helped you get there, right? Systems helped you up. People's sacrifices, you know. The military, those who've given up their life, have helped you get there, right? It's not you alone. And really, there's no convincing some of us about it because it's not really a decision based on logic. Oh, I really think I did this myself. No, there's a level of maliciousness involved. There's actual an orientation towards selfishness to such an extent that we're willing and wanting to dominate and hurt and control others. And unfortunately, with the forces in this world, as the Bible describes and many other scriptures describe across cultures, they can manipulate others and entrap them in some of these systems, especially when we don't have the will, the fortitude allowed us by healthy spirituality. Often religion has become bent in recent centuries. We see that with Christianity, Catholicism. We see that with a lot of Islam as well, a lot of sects of anyone, especially the biggest, because the powers that be that want to control those of us who want to enter something with some influence and dominate and hurt, we tend to get our way. We tend to work our way up. We tend to be willing to backstab, right? That's kind of the marker of a psychopath, sociopath, right? We tend to use tools other people won't to rise to the top, blackmail, all these things, because nothing, as far as we're concerned, will stop us to get to our goal. And so the part of us that has that perspective, I ask you to see that you're dead inside. That part is dead, it's cold. It finds some solace in that dominating structure, that dominating move, that hurtful glance, that painful uh, backstab, but it's not true pleasure. This isn't a point of view type of thing. You are reducing your ability to feel. We all have this to some extent, right? But if we start to see it, to see that selfishness come out, that sense of I'm me, gotta do what's best for me, I don't even care what happens to them, right? That part of us, that's really it. If we see that, we can start to say, oh, God, this isn't part of you. Let me let this go. Let me let this go. Because as Jesus taught us, He's the vine. God is the vine, known by many names across cultures. And the part that is off the vine, it's gathered by the gardener and burned, according to Jesus. Now, I don't think that means God sends us to hell to be punished. I think the part of us that grafts its way off, and ungraft, it cuts its way off of the vine, it can't help but feel that pain of being disconnected from source, right? That part of us that feels and believes it's really alone, and others are not even anything worth caring about. That's setting up our mind for pain, for hurt, for a long, long slog of hellishness, of a sense of being in a very bad state. And so we want other people to feel that way too. So this is an opportunity for us, for those of us seeing that part of ourselves, and those of us seeing that we don't have much of that, to return to source, to, as Jesus often preached, to turn around. They used the word repent, but it meant turn 180 degrees back to the heaven within you. Because Jesus wasn't one to say he's somewhere that we can never be. That's what we Christians have often done, those of us that are Christians, in our traditions, right? And we've put it on other people. We've said, no, you can't go to heaven. No, you're doomed. I'm so worried about you. Oh my God, I'm doing this for your sake. No, that's all fake. It's all not God. As Jesus said, why say, Lord, Lord, and not do what I've told you to do? And he told us to live up to his example by seeing where we're addicted, not just to drugs and stuff, but to outward things, and to start adding some light, some awareness to it. Noticing where we can love more, where we have a sense of separation. Loving others as ourselves. Loving others as he loved us, as he told us to do. And there are examples from many traditions, but I am who I am. My name's Corey. I haven't mentioned it. I usually don't. But I'm a Swedenborgian minister. I'm a Christian mystic. I don't think anyone else needs to follow that mystic. I don't necessarily follow him myself most of the time, but he influenced my journey and I ended up part of this organization. It's a cool one. But we're all starting close to God because God is within us. It doesn't matter what our tradition is. And often, if we are in a religion, the reason we feel so disconnected is because someone and many people along the way have passed on this sense of disconnection, that God is far and so disconnected. Muslims, for example, I went to a mosque growing up. My dad was Muslim. After converting from Christianity, his dad's a Baptist minister. And I remember hearing all the time that you cannot connect to God. God is so far different, so different you can't imagine. And there's a big gaping space, not very different than what most Christians hear, between us and God, right? And yet the text itself, Muhammad taught that Jesus or God was compassionate. And yes, Jesus is compassionate in that tradition too. Isa is often pronounced in the Muslim faith, Jesus. But that God was compassionate, merciful. All these things, that's a human thing, right? We can do that. So there has to be some similarity, right? There's a lot of things in the text that talk about God. And yet often in practice, someone's trying to disconnect us and saying it's really, really important, otherwise you'll burn. Okay? We burn when we feel disconnected, actually. That's actually what's happening. And so know that spiritual sunshine is your light. All gifts are from God, right? You're not that bad because you're not what you've done. Who knows the influences upon you? So now turn to God. Turn to your own light, whatever you call it, source. And be embodied, be empowered. And know that you might be in 6 now, but here comes 7. Peace.